Hi everyone, in this video we will be talking about angular interpolation, property binding, two-way binding using of course ngModule. We'll also be talking about event binding as well. So let's get started with this. First off, you might be wondering what exactly is binding. So I'm just going to put it this way. Simply put, binding is just a way of exchanging information, getting information from a specific place and rendering it somewhere else. That's just basically what binding is. But let's just take a look at how it works basically. The first thing we'll be taking a look at is interpolations in Angular. Let's take a look at, let's close this and let's move over to our login page. So let's take a look at interpolations. So let's say that I have a statement here that says this let's say good morning, and I actually want to write the name of the person, but because I actually don't know who exactly is going to be using this website. The name of the person using this website might be Augustine, it might be Samuel, it might be anything. You understand? So I don't know who is going to use the website, and this is where I need to put a kind of a variable in between my good morning and the name of the person, right? So for now, I'm just going to write Augustine anyways. So let's just say Augustine, and I'll correct this later on. So I can then, okay. So I can then come here, let's just say H2, welcome to our website. So over here, it just goes, good morning, Augustine, welcome to our website. But let's say the person here is not really Augustine. Let's say the person is Sam. How do we dynamically change the name of the person? So first off, in a real life scenario, we would have the name of the person coming from the database, and the database actually presents us the data. But then how do we render that particular data that's coming from the database into the login page templates that we have over here? So what we're going to do is that we're going to use something called the double color braces. So we just have this double color brace here, and we close it with another double color brace here. And in between, we're going to put a variable which is called the name of the person. But this variable, we will need to first of all declare this variable in our login component TS. So we'll go to our TS and we're going to declare this variable over here. So first off, I'm going to call this username, and now the username is obviously going to be of type of string, and that is going to be equal to, now let's calculate that the username is equal to Augustine. So let's say that this is Augustine now, and I can come here, instead of writing Augustine over here, I could just say username. And when I save this now, we can still say good morning, Augustine. And if I want to change this name, let's assume that the name coming from our database is actually Sam. So we can just change it to Sam, and we come over here and we can see good morning, Sam. So this is actually what interpolation is actually all about in Angular, and it's just that so straightforward. So let's talk a bit about event binding. So event binding is actually what happens whenever an event occurs. And there are different type of events that could occur on a web page. The most popular kind of events, I think it's the on-click events, whenever you click upon something and you want something to happen. However, we still have some other kind of events like scrolling events on mouse hover and so many other kind of events. But we're just going to be dealing with on-click events for the sake of this example. So first off, I'm going to say button because we need a button to click on. So let's say button, and I would say click me. Click me. So what I want to do now is that I want to create a click event. So to create a click event in Angular, we are going to say click. And if you notice over here, you can see that we surrounded this click with a bracket. Now, this is actually what we call event binding, because the event here is actually a click event. So we just write it this way. And what we're going to do next is that we are going to write in between here a specific method that we want to call whenever we click on this. So let's take a look at this first. Let's say over here, let me call this click me method. Just going to call this click me method, and This method is not going to return anything, so I'm just going to give it a void over here. So what I really want to do here is that whenever I click on the button, I want to change the person name anything, to anything at all. So I'm going to say that what this dot username, which is actually this username that we have here, I want it to be equal to, let's say June. Yes, so I want this to be equal to June. So I'm going to save this right now, and I'll come over here and I would say click method. So can you see that I just called this function, and if I should press my control key and click on this, it takes me to this particular method. So the expectation is that using the event binding, because I've used event binding here, whenever I click upon this button, this name is going to change from Sam to June. So let's see that in action. So this would reload, and when I click on this button now, we can see that this name changes from Sam to June. But when I refresh again, it goes back to Sam. When I click on it again, it changes to June. So we can see how we've been able to use event binding to change the value of what we actually have on our page. So this is basically what we can use event binding for. So let's take a look at the next one. The next one is actually property binding, right? So if we want to use property binding is all about, it's just like interpolation, but in this time around, we are not really putting it between our HTML tag. We actually want to bind a specific property of an HTML tag. Let's take another example here. So let's say we have image, for example. Image actually has about what? Two different properties here. So we have the source property and we have the alt property. So I'm not going to call this image anything right now. So I'm not going to put a source to it. So you can see we don't have anything showing up there. But then we just add an alt text to this. So for this particular alt text, I'm just going to call this a sample image, for instance, and let's save this now. So we don't have the image showing up, but we now have the alt text showing up, which is just saying sample image, right? So let's say we want this particular alt text to be dynamic. You understand? So let's say this is meant to show the picture of a person, and we want the alt text to be the name of the person. So what we're going to say in this case now is this: we're going to use property binding. Now, whenever we're using property binding, we have to make use of square brackets. So let me take this out first. So just to recap, event binding uses the normal brackets. Property binding uses square brackets, while interpolation uses the double color braces. So don't forget that. So we're going to make use of square brackets now, and I'm just going to make use of the same variable I used for the person name, which is username. So when I add this over here now and save this, we can now see that the alt text here is now Sam. And when I click on this now, you can see that the alt text here changes to June, and the name here also changes to June, because we have actually changed the name of this variable whenever we click upon whenever this particular click method got triggered. So that's just basically how property binding works. But I'd like to give a better example of property binding. So I'll come over here. This is actually on Splash. So I'm going to take the URL of this image. So copy image address, and I'm going to come over here. So normally I can actually just put this URL over here, and I'll be fine, right? But I don't want to do this. What I actually want to do is to create another button, and I'm going to call this load image, and I'll call this method as well load image. So this is actually showing us a red because I've not created this method. So I'll move over to this part, and I would say load image is the name of the method. So this won't return anything, and what I just want to do here is that I'm going to create a variable here called image URL, and this is still going to be a string. I'm not actually going to declare it to be anything, so it could either be a string or undefined. So it simply means it's a string or there is nothing there. So in this case, right now, I'm not assigning it to anything and there's nothing there. So what I want to do is that whenever this load image method is being called, I'm going to change the value of the image URL. So I will say this image URL to be equal to this particular image URL here. So first off, I'm going to use property binding with this particular image tag here. And remember, property binding is square brackets. So I'll make use of a square bracket. Then I'm going to come over here and I would say, and I'll come over here, then I would say image URL, which is actually the variable that we have in here. So whenever I click on load image, that is expected to happen to load up that image for me. So let's see. Now we have click me. We can see we have Sam. Right now we don't have an image loading. The image is currently undefined, so we don't have an image being loaded right now. That's why it's saying Sam. It's showing us the alt text. If I should do click me, this is going to change to June. But the moment I click on this, watch what happens. It actually loads up that particular image for us. So I don't know why it's not showing up right now. Probably because, oh, okay, yeah, it was actually loading up. So you can see that we have this image. It's actually very big from Unsplash. So you can see we have the image showing up over here right now. So let me refresh this again and let's see it again. So if I should click on load image, it actually takes the URL into that particular property and it just shows up the image. Now I'm going to show you again so you understand. This time around, I'm going to inspect the element. So let's come over here and let's select this image. So you can see right now that this image, look at the source over here. The source, let me increase this so you would be able to see this clearly. We can see we have the source over here and the source is actually equal to nothing, unlike the alt, which is by default equal to Sam. So when I click on click me, you can see that this is changing from Sam to June over here as well. And when I click on load image, watch what's going to happen. The source is going to be equal to the image location. So click on load image and now you can see that this particular source is now equal to the image location, which is thereby making the image to show up on the web browser. So we might just want to keep things a little bit neat here and probably give this a little bit of styling. And we can just say that the width of this should just be, let's just say 200 pixels to keep it small. So we can see it within the page. So when we load image again, we have this over here. So that's just basically how property binding and event binding actually works, and also interpolation. But let's take a look at two-way binding using ngModule. So two-way binding works with could work with components, but when we want to use it with forms, we might want to use ngModule, which is also a two-way binding. So now that we have restyled the width, let's talk a bit about ngModule. But before we do that, I still want to show us just one more example of how we can use event binding actually. So aside from onClick, remember I said there are also more events that we can use with Angular. So let's take a look at this one. So here I'm going to create an input, and this input is just going to be a simple text. So what I want to do is that instead of me always changing the value of the user from the component TS like we have over here. So I've been changing this value from here. I just want to change the value from this text input over here. So I'm going to change this now and you can see we have a new text input here. So I want a situation whereby as I type over here, it's just going to show us the name of the person over here. So I'm going to use a new event binding to do that. So there, that event binding is going to be the key up event binding. So I'm going to say when we have a key up event, so let's say I want the new value to be equal to whatsoever the value of this is. So what I'm going to do first of all is to get the value of this particular element. So to get the value of this element, I can make something that is called a template variable. So you just use a hash sign for that. So with the templates variable, I can give it a name. So the name of this variable is actually called the name in this case. So I want the username, which is actually the variable in here, which is equal to Sam. I want it to be equal to, name dot value. So in this case now, whenever I raise my key up, the new value of the username will be equal to whatsoever is the value of the input. So let me save this now and come over here. So here I can easily change this now to Augustine. So you can see this, I can change this to anything I want, Augustine. And you can see as it's changing over here, it's also changing here as well. I can change this to man. I can change this to anything I actually want to change this to. So this is actually very nice, but there is an easy way of doing this using ngModule as well. So to do this using ngModule now, I just need to come over here. I'm going to remove all of this, and this is what we call two-way binding. I'm going to change all of this and okay, let me go back so I will show you something first. So can you see, do you see this? That first off, this is actually equal to nothing, right? And that is because we are not actually assigning the exact value in here. So we're not actually initializing the exact value of this input. So to actually do this, I'm just going to say that my value, I'm going to bind this as well, should be equal to username. So now if I should do this now, you can see that our initial value now is now called Sam in this case. So you can see we have two binding happening here. First, we have the event binding, and we also have the property binding. We're using the property binding to initialize the value of the input, while we're using this event binding to change the value of the variable, which will then reflect in the good morning and the name of the person. So we're just writing so much code in here because of we just want to put two binding, whereby we can actually use two-way binding to achieve this using ngModule. So I'm going to take this away now, and I'm going to use ngModule to achieve all of this. So to do this, I'm just going to say ngModule, and I'm going to select this last one over here. So take note, ngModule is actually being imported to on our app module. My IDE just actually imported that for me, actually. So you can see it's actually imported from forms module, and we have it over here as well as from module. So ngModule is actually a part of form module, and the reason why we don't really import this the moment we start the Angular application is because we don't know if we're going to need this module at that time. So whenever you need something, just import it at that time, and that's the best way to keep your app bundle size a little bit smaller. And if you want to learn more about what app bundle size are, you can actually just check this video over here. Okay, so back to this. Now we have our ngModule, and all we need to do is to put this username over there. So what's going to happen here is that this is going to perform the action of replacing the value of this username, and it's also going to perform the action of initializing the initial value of this input as well. So when we save this now, we'll come over here. Now you can see we have Sam written over here. And when we change this now to Augustine, you can see that this is actually changing as well. And we can actually write whatsoever we feel like writing over here in this input, and it's just going to keep changing that way. And when we remove everything, nothing shows. So let's just take it to let's just say this is June or any other thing. Let's say this is June. Let's say this is Monday, if that's the name of a person. So Monday is this way. Monday. So that's just how it goes over here. And this is basically how you can use all sorts of binding in Angular. So in this video, we've actually talked about interpolation in Angular, which is actually how we use to display this data, this variable data over here. And one other thing you can note about interpolation is that you can actually do some basic arithmetic in it. So you can actually say 2 plus 2, and it's going to actually give you the answer, which is 4 in this case. So you can see this, right? So there are some basic arithmetic operation that you can actually perform within interpolations in Angular. And you can also add some kind of string concatenation, within an interpolated string. So you can actually do this username plus, let's just say we want the person's name to be, we want the person's surname to be Sunday for whatsoever reason. So we can just say Sunday, and this is going to be a string. So I know we can actually write a Sunday over here and that's going to show up, but just in case you want to add it within that, it's also possible. So we can say the username, you can see that this is Sam Sunday, and we just need to leave a space in here. So you can see we have the Sam Sunday, and when we change this to Augustine, you can see we have Augustine Sunday over here. So that's just how this actually works, and we've actually spoken about string concatenation, interpolations. We've also made mention of event binding, property binding, two-way binding using ngModule. And that will be all for this video. Please remember to subscribe to this video if this video was helpful to you. See you all in the next video. Bye-bye for now.